Hello everyone and welcome to the third of our videos on statutory interpretation. Today we're going to be looking at the second rule, which is the golden rule. In our previous video we were looking at the literal rule. Just as a reminder that there are four approaches to statutory interpretation. There's the literal rule, which we looked at last time, the golden rule, the mischief rule, and the purposive approach. And I'm doing an individual video for each of these approaches. So today our focus is here, rule number 2, the golden rule. Obviously, we need to start with a definition of what the golden rule is, and we need to look at how is this approach different to the literal rule that we saw last time. And the definition here is that the golden rule is a modification of the literal rule. So we start with the literal rule, giving words their plain, ordinary meaning, but then we're being told to avoid an absurd result. In order to really illustrate this rule for you, we're going to start to have a look at the first case, which is the case of Adler and George. Now, what I've got for you here, I'm sure you'll agree, is an absolutely fantastic diagram that I've drawn, which is hopefully going to make this case make total sense to you. So I think I'm probably going to have to explain what this is showing. So, if we have a look here, this square, this box that we've got, is an RAF base. Okay, so this is an RAF base, and this guy here is inside the RAF base. Are you all with me so far? So he's in it, actually in it, not near it. And what I've got here, all the little dashes around the RAF base, are telling you that all of this area outside of the base is near the base. It's not in the base, it's near the base. And this bloke shouldn't have been in the RAF base. He had no business there whatsoever. He was just there for a nosy. And he was caught in the RAF base and he was charged with an offence. And he was charged with an offence under the Official Secrets Act, which makes it a crime to be, and these were the words that needed to be interpreted, in the vicinity of a prohibited place. And an RAF base is a prohibited place. Now, if you think about what we learnt in the last video when we were looking at the literal rule, if you look at what this guy's actually done, if the Act says it's an offence to be in the vicinity of this place, he's not guilty of an offence. And the reason for that is because if you think about the meaning of the word vicinity, vicinity means to be near or to be around a place. But our character here is not near a prohibited place, he's in it. Now you can see that that would be totally absurd. It'd be completely absurd to be guilty of a crime if you were near the place, but innocent if you actually managed to break in. So the judge here didn't want to apply the literal rule. He wanted to avoid an absurd result. So he looked at the meaning of the word and he said, okay, the word vicinity does usually mean near or around or in the location of a place, but I'm going to interpret it to also include in a prohibited place. So he tweaked the meaning of the words so that he could find this character here guilty of an offence. So if I come on to the next PowerPoint slide here, you can see that we've got the facts that I've just described to you written here, where Adler was being charged with being in an RAF station contrary to the Official Secrets Act. And as I've just said, his argument was a good one, actually, that he was not guilty because he was already inside the place and the Act made it an offence to be near it. And if we applied the literal rule here, then he'd be correct and he'd be not guilty. The words that needed to be interpreted in the Official Secrets Act was in the vicinity of a prohibited place. And as I just explained to you, the judge here used the golden rule wide approach and said that in the vicinity of could mean on or in or near the prohibited place. So they were tweaking the meaning of the words there in order to find Adler guilty. And that, of course, avoided an absurd result. So I just wanted to look at some of the advantages and disadvantages of this rule. The golden rule, there isn't much to say about it, to be honest with you. It's not the most interesting of the rules. But if we start with the advantages then, they are listed on the slide for you. Advantages of this rule is that errors in drafting can be corrected immediately. And if you think about the Official Secrets Act, which we've just looked at, it does look like it was an error to say in the vicinity of, because clearly Parliament could not have intended it to be an offence for you to be near a place, but not actually on or in the place. And this rule allows the courts to alter the wording to make sense of the Act and to avoid an absurd or repugnant meaning. And arguably that would have been more preferable if we'd done that in cases like Whiteley and Chapel, for instance. Decisions are also generally more in line with Parliament's intention, certainly when you compare it to the literal rule. And you can say that another advantage is that the judges are trying to respect the exact words of Parliament, except in limited circumstances. So they're not totally rewriting the Act of Parliament or anything like that. They're making a little tweak, if you like. And this rule has been described as an escape route. On the other hand, though, there are some disadvantages to the rule. And what we've seen here is that in the case of Adler and George, a judge was able to add or change the meaning of statutes. He changed the meaning of the word vicinity in the case of Adler and George. And you can say that when they're doing that, they are actually becoming lawmakers. And they are infringing the separation of powers that we've looked at in a previous topic. Another problem is that judges have no power to intervene for pure injustice. So if we think back to the case of Berryman that we looked at when we were looking at the literal rule, that was a very harsh decision that we saw in that case. But a judge wouldn't be able to use the golden rule there because the meaning of the words were very clear. And he couldn't have tweaked them to get a different result there. Michael Zander has written about this rule and he's been quite critical of it. It's always good where possible to include quotes in your exam answers. So Michael Zander, a bit weird I suppose, described it as a feeble parachute. So he's referring to the fact that the golden rule has been described as an escape route. But he's being quite critical here. He's saying it's feeble. And if something's feeble, it's weak, it's not really sufficient. It's quite limited in its use. Another quote from Zander here. Again, it's in purple for you. Zander also described the golden rule as a, quote, unpredictable safety valve. Again, referring to the escape route thing. Because And what he's meaning here with unpredictable safety valve is a problem with the rule is it's not always easy to predict when the courts will use it. And of course, that means then that lawyers aren't able to advise their clients. So that's the golden rule then. Please watch the next video, which we are going to look at the mischief rule, which will be the third rule or approach to statutory interpretation.